The latest news, national issues, the political scene, and conversations with prominent personalities. All these firsthand at the forefront. Good morning. I am Attorney Karen Jimeno. OCTA Research released last week the results of its third quarter Tugon ng Masa Senatorial Preference Survey, conducted from August 28 to September 2, 2025, based on 1,200 respondents. SWS has yet to initiate a polling survey for the 2025 elections, while Pulse Asia has yet to update its senatorial preference survey released in July this year. Without similar polling opinion surveys from SWS and Pulse Asia to compare with, the public wants to know, how reliable is OCTA Research's latest senatorial preference survey? And what does this mean for the 2025 midterm elections? We have with us this morning OCTA Research Fellow and also a professor of applied mathematics at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Dr. Guido David, and a famous veteran political strategist who was involved in 4 presidential victories, Mr. Lito Banayo. Good morning, Dr. Guido and Mr. Lito. Good morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Attorney Karen.
Let's start off with OCTA. So the name comes from 8 founders. That's why, 8 for OCTA. Can you give us a background, Dr. Guido? Are you part of that 8?
Yes, I was actually part of the 8. And this was started by a good friend of mine, Professor Ranjit Rai, who's also a professor at the University of the Philippines. So it started way back, even before the pandemic. And we were already discussing this, before 2018, I believe. And we were considering putting up another polling firm, just like what we have with SWS and Pulse Asia. And now, actually, there are several more that we're seeing come up. So it was that. We had very humble beginnings, mostly UP, University of the Philippines professors that were part of this organization.
And OCTA gained popularity during the pandemic. Is the fundamental core of OCTA for science research?
Well, it was fundamentally for polling, actually, but during the pandemic, so we were all, displaced, so to speak. We weren't really doing much at that time. Some of us were still teaching, but we wanted to lend our hand to the country as far as the pandemic was concerned, and that's how we got into the pandemic. So it's actually a bit strange that we got our name because of the pandemic, because we were doing pandemic research. And at that time, we involved several scientists, for example, Dr. Benjamin Ko of the Metro Pacific Group, Father Nicanor Austriaco from UST, and also Dr. Michael T, who's now Chancellor of UP Manila. So they were part of the group that was giving pandemic advice. But now it's more focused on the polling, which is the original intent of OCTA Research.
And Lito, you have been involved in 4 presidential victories before. Can you give us an idea who these 4 are?
First, the Corridoy campaign for the snap elections of 1986. Then President Estrada, 1998. And then President Pinoy Aquino, that was 2010. And President Duterte in 2016. I also had my share of losses, though. Ping Lacson, for instance, in 2004.
As president?
Yes, Isko Moreno in 2022. No? So, hindi naman lahat panalo.
Well, in 2022, you were the campaign manager of Isko Moreno. Did you leave at some point? We seem to recall that you resigned, or did you stay until the end of the
No, I stayed until
elections?
the end. No, I stayed until the end. I don't leave my principles. I think it is the present PCO press secretary, Cesar Chavez, who left us when, if I recall rightly, when Sara Duterte joined BBM.
Mm-hmm. How do you pick the candidates that you support?
Well, first, except I think in the case of ERAP, no, who I was not really quite friendly with before. All the guys who I worked for, I had been associated with them in the past. No? So it was more being friends, and at the same time, I looked at it as more of a crusade, especially in the case of Cory and Doy, against Marcos Sr.
And have you always been a political strategist?
No, I was in the business sector for the younger years of my life until I met Ninoy Aquino in the U.S. when he was in exile, and he was a very magnetic personality, very convincing, and he asked me to help Doy Laurel organize the first opposition political coalition at that time, which was Unido. No? So that's how I got into
Okay.
all of this.
And Dr. Guido, for OCTA, when did you start doing political surveys?
Actually, our first survey, I believe, was back in 2020, so sometime after we started doing the pandemic research. And it had very humble beginnings, so it was essentially self-funded at that time. It was a very small which means like a small number of respondents. And but since then we've been doing it more regularly, like every quarter. And
before, you said that you practically bankrolled it yourself, like OCTA. Right now, the recent survey that came out this September, are there any individuals or political parties that funded that survey?
Well, the national survey is still non-commissioned. We have a subscriber base, so they essentially pay to get access to the surveys. But the good thing about having a non-commissioned survey is that we decide on the questions, and it's it's supposed to be politically agnostic. That's the intent of it. The subscribers will just have access to that, and that's what they're paying for. We also have some local surveys that are being conducted, but I can't really talk about that because they're generally under NDA, and we don't usually release these other results to the public.
So those that are under NDA and commissioned by, for example, potential candidates at the local level, do they use surveys to make decisions?
Definitely. It's a guide to make them decisions, to strategize, to have an idea where to target or if they have a good chance of winning the election.
Lito, do you use surveys for example, choosing, candidates you choose based on friendships and those who perhaps solicit your advice, but do you use surveys to make decisions?
Oh, definitely. It's probably the most important tool in determining whether a candidate should run or not run. No? Of course, you have FGDs, but normally you do these closer to the campaign period. No? But the quantitative research is very important.
And for OCTA, how do you know which sample is going to be more or less accurate? Right now, you had 1,200 for the latest September survey. Mm-hmm. You mentioned back in 2020 when you first started your first political survey, you had a smaller group of respondents. How small was that?
Well, it was, I believe it was 600 respondents, but mostly in Metro Manila. So the margin of error was still, it was also small for that survey because it was just focused in Metro Manila. But surveys then do cost money to conduct, especially if it's nationwide. So you will find that most survey firms actually use 1,200 as a base number because it's financially something that is, they can manage it, more manageable. But some other survey firms actually use a larger sample, like 2,400 or 3,000. So the more samples, the lower the error margin, or you could say almost more reliable in terms of a smaller error. But 1,200 gives us a decent 3% margin of error. So I think that's why most firms actually use 1,200.
And this is face-to-face?
Yes, this is face-to-face survey. So it's randomly done across the country. So that's why the margin of error is maintained at up to 3%.
Well, Lito, we've seen the latest OCTA survey this September. What is your comment in terms of those that top the survey? We have two Tulfos being number 1 and number 2, Congressman Erwin and Ben Tulfo.
Yeah, that was quite surprising to me when I saw that. No, I've seen a commissioned survey commissioned by a businessman, where the rankings are basically, I mean, the names in the top 18, I would say top 18, are basically the same, except for some rankings, as in the case of Ben Tulfo, who in another survey was same period, the first week of September. Ben Tulfo was number 5 in that survey. But otherwise, it's basically the same.
And Lito, in your experience, when you see the surveys that you use as well for making decisions, do they tend to be accurate?
Generally, yes. But then again, yes in terms of whether to run or not. So normally I advise potential candidates that if your awareness level is lower than 70, or your conversion of that awareness is less than, single digit, you might as well forget it. No? I've had several friends or clients who decided to go for Congress or a party list instead of running for the Senate because their numbers were not that good. One of them is a common friend of ours. So ganon, no? It's always a case of looking at the numbers, and otherwise you'd be wasting your money. But on the other hand, there are candidates that, even if we look at the OCTA survey, who are doing not very well, but they're still in the first page, so to speak, but who has oodles of money, So I would think that if he or she spends her money wisely, she could make it to the lower 6.
So it seems like you've advised people for national posts and also local posts. Is being a political strategist a lucrative profession?
No, not really. Well, in my case, I don't charge. I've never, I don't come up with a fee. Bahala na sila, no? So, especially in the case of national candidates, no? I've not really handled, I think I've handled only 2 local candidates, no? Kisumbing in Cebu and Pepito Alvarez in Palawan. But other than that, I normally handle national candidates.
Well, Lito, Isko Moreno before was doing very well in Manila, and it was his first term as mayor. But then he started polling as a presidential candidate, and then he left his post to become a presidential candidate. Did you at some point advise him against that move?
Well, he started very well in the 2021 surveys. No, the unraveling, so to speak, came when BBM and Sara joined together. At that point in time, I knew it was going to be very difficult. But nonetheless, nandun na yun, no? So you'd have to continue and hope for the best.
And Dr. Guido, when you look at the surveys from a mathematical standpoint, probability-wise, when you have those 12 names there, do they tend to be more or less the potential winning candidates, or what would account for drastic changes?
Well, they definitely have potential to win. And we also saw this in the previous election in 2022. Initially, when we started polling back in 2021 for senators, some of the names were already there, and some were still not there. For example, I remember Senator Mark Villar was a bit lower because maybe his awareness for himself, not for the brand. Of course, the Villar brand is very strong, but his own personal awareness was maybe not as high yet. But eventually, he broke into the top 12. I mean, we saw the numbers, and he was even as high as number one in some of our later surveys, not the one right before the elections. So there are some correlations, of course. These are very good indicators. If you're in the top 12, of course, it's better than not being in the top 12. But that doesn't mean that if you're outside the top 12, then you don't have a chance. In fact, I agree with Sir Lito that if you're polling somewhere with about at least 10% of the vote, then you definitely have a chance. And because campaign hasn't started yet at this time, and we don't know who the final list is, the COCs will be filed maybe around next week.
By next week, yes.
Yes, and then we'll have a definite idea of who will be running. I mean, some of these names may not actually run, and there may be some other names who are not in the list who may actually run. You will notice that the person we were talking about, Isko Moreno, is not on the list because our research suggests or indicates that he might be running for Manila mayor, but he might still change his mind, and that might change the configurations in the rankings. And there may be a few other names. I mean, for example, Attorney Lenny is also not on the list because our research indicates that she might be running for a local position, but that may also change. I mean, she had a recent meeting with the vice president. Who knows, maybe that could lead to her running for senator. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating. Sir Lito's the strategist here. I'm just a numbers guy.
Well, I noticed that there's a line after, I think, the 15th.
Right.
What does that mean? Does that have any significance from a mathematical standpoint?
Well, the line we draw that line for those who are statistically within the top 12, which means that even if they're like number 13, with the margin of error, they could still make it to the top 12. So, but that's the current result. And when we do the survey, when we release the survey, the caveat is that this is the preference as of today, and it's not forward looking, meaning it's not as of May 2025, it's as of September 2024. So there could still be a lot of changes that could happen within the next few months.
Well, in terms of changes, Lito, will Isko Moreno run for mayor of Manila?
Yes, he's definitely running for mayor. There's no backing out from that. Dr. Guido said that there may be changes in the names, no? Because some may run and some may not run. Somebody who's definitely not running, as far as I know, because I talked to him, is Rodrigo Duterte. He's not running for senator. No? If at all, one of the children may run for senator. I cannot say for sure who, but one of them might run for senator. Sino pa ba yung medyo...
What about VP Lenny? Will she run for Senate?
I think she has already
local?
decided to go for Naga City Mayor. And I think she doesn't even have an opponent in that city, no? So more or less ganon, no?
Pepito Alvarez, he's currently in Congress. Is he going to go back to Palawan?
He will be in Palawan.
Governor.
He's a congressman right now. I don't know if he's going for another position in Palawan, but he will be in Palawan. One important person whose name is in the so-called first page, but the survey of the August 28 to September 2 survey did not capture the announcement that he's sick with cancer, sarcoma. No? I would think, based on previous experience, that because people vote with emotions more than anything else, no? I would think that, for instance, if his wife, Dr. Lisa Ramoso Ong, no, who is also a physician and who's a partner in his medical advisory blogs, would run, she probably would make it.
And we're talking about Dr. Willie Ong.
Dr. Willie Ong, yeah.
And so how important is name recall when it comes to making it to an elected post?
Very, no? Because of our, we don't have political parties in the real sense of the word in this country. All we have are flags of convenience, no? And that's why turncoatism is very prevalent in our political culture, based on the 1987 Constitution. So, name recall is almost, I'd say, 75 to 80% of the effort. No? So that is why we have celebrities who probably do not deserve to be in the Senate, but are in the Senate. No? And we have very respectable persons with very good experience in government, very high academic qualifications, who always lose. No? An example, I don't know him personally, but I was close to his father before, Chel Jokno, very highly qualified, but unfortunately, the name recall, we're 3 generations apart from Senator Jose Diokno, his father, who was one of the best senators the Republic ever had, no? But, ganun eh. Yun ang problema.
In terms of reliability, how would you rate political surveys? But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back.
We are giving spotlight with these innovative business enterprises that shares growth in our community. We're giving these entrepreneurs a chance to boost their business in the market. Let's join Mai Rodriguez together with different entrepreneurs to know their stories and challenges.
Remember, the road to success is never a straight line.
Pathways to Success, 11 a.m. on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
It doesn't seem to be a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And then there's the speed and the intensity that come into play.
Who's going to benefit and how do investors position themselves?
As an equity analyst, how central are these decisions to your analysis?
Get the latest on the economy and the financial markets, down to each basis point.
We begin with the Philippine peso further strengthening against the US dollar.
Basis Points with Mikey Oreta, weekdays, 9:30 a.m. on BNC. Your newest source of news and information.
That's it?
Follows you everywhere, every day.
Wow.
Oh, man.
On cable and free TV. Online.
He joins us from the Batasan Pamasabi.
On mobile.
Simulan na natin ang agenda.
This is BNC, and we are everywhere. Weekdays on BNC, the Billionario News Channel. BNC, the Billionario News Channel, always on top.
Good morning, I'm Rain Musni and welcome to Follow the Money. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey.
Harness the power of your money so it can take you where there is growth, where there is investment, where there is freedom. Rain Musni sits down with the experts to know where your finances is taking you. Weekdays, 10:30 a.m. on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Welcome back at the Forefront. In terms of reliability, how would you rate political surveys? We'll start with Dr. Guido.
Well, I'm aware. I'm more, informed about our own survey that we release. So I would say that, of course, it's within the margin of error. But I see a lot of other surveys as well. Some of them are, I believe, done using panel surveys. So it's a different mode of survey that wherein respondents answer online, using an app. And I've been looking at the comparison. I think maybe in other countries, the panel survey may be more reliable because more people have these apps. It could be spread out to the general population. As far as the Philippines is concerned, I'm not yet convinced that it's as reliable as the face-to-face surveys that we conduct. And I think, like I said, the surveys are generally a guide. I won't stake my life on the survey results. I won't. Okay. I would not, because
you would not. Okay.
Which means that, I mean, what I mean is that in the sense that because I'm generally risk averse, so I would have to be practically 99% sure of something before I would stake my life in it. I mean, not even 99, maybe 99.99%.
But since you're a numbers guy, if you were to give like a percentage of how reliable it would be roughly?
Well, statistically, it says that the confidence is 95%. So you could say that with 95% confidence, we have the range is within plus minus 3%. So, and I mean, looking at history, I mean, it's hard to figure out if the survey results currently are 100% reliable. But in the past 2022 elections, I'm happy to say that we actually got the magic 12 correct in the survey. And even the president's and the vice president's numbers, our survey results reflected closely with the actual results. So, we didn't get the rankings of the senators. We didn't predict or we didn't foresee that Senator Robin Hood would be number one during that time. But
yes, you predicted Raffy Tulfo to be number one, I think.
I think it was Senator Raffy.
Like you predicted to be number one,
right.
And it was Robin. So in that case, what happened?
Well, sometimes there are things that happen within the last few weeks of the survey period. Some groups, for example, decide to organize support for certain candidates. And our own survey showed that maybe as much as 25 to 30% of people actually decide on their choices on the day of the election itself. So that's why as Sir Lito mentioned, awareness is very important. But we also see that it's important, recommendations from family members
also plays a role.
Right. It's a big weight on an individual's voting. Sometimes, I'm not speaking for everyone here, but I believe there are some voters who go there without, they might have an idea who to vote for certain positions, but they will fill in, let's say, the 12 slate slots, and then they will ask their friend or their family member, who are you voting for? And then they might just choose those names as well.
Let's start from a qualitative standpoint after hearing the quantitative part. Why do you think Robin ranked number one?
Because Raffy Tulfo did not get the Iglesia block vote. That made the difference. Even if you look at the numbers, the difference between Raffy and you would immediately assume that it was because of the Iglesia endorsement or non-endorsement of Raffy.
Do you think that would also play a role in the 2025 elections, getting the INC or Iglesia Ni Cristo support?
Oh yes, especially for those. I normally would think that the first survey after the certificates of candidacy have been filed, the first 8 are more or less sure of winning. More or less, no? Unless there's a fatal error during the campaign. And the next 8, the number 9 to 16, no? Doon magpapalit-palit pa yan. And that is where the block votes matter a lot. No? Yung winning or not winning, no? Not being in the magic 12.
Dr. Guido, how are religious sectors factored in for the surveys?
Well, they're factored in because we can also see which religious groups will vote for who. But of course...
do you ask them?
Well, we ask them what their religion is, and then we can correlate, these, for example, if they're born again, if they're Christian, if they're Muslim, and we can see the percentage of those voting for certain candidates. So it's factored in. But the block voting is not really factored in yet. And that's something that we have to account for, as Sir Lito mentioned, that if a certain group decides to vote and block for a certain candidate, then it should be technically accounted for, but it's not directly accounted for in the survey.
But how do you determine the respondents? For statistics, there's always what they call randomization. Right. But when you're doing face-to-face surveys, some common comments from Filipinos when they look at a survey, bakit ako hindi na sa survey? Or they often asked, is it just the CDE demographic that gets surveyed?
Well, that's a good question, Attorney Karen. And we survey 1,200 per quarter. So the odds of being selected is basically 1,200 divided by 100 million. So that's like 0.01% or something. My math might be off. But so the chances of being selected are small. And most of the voters are within the C, especially the D and E. D accounts for about 60% of the voters. So most voters are in that group, and E accounts for 30%. I have a class with 100 students, and if I pull together 10 of these classes, I would get 1,000 students. But if I ask them a survey question, it won't be that reliable because most of them will be in the A, B, and C group. Maybe some of them might be in the D or the E. So that means it's more weighted towards a certain demographic. But the face-to-face survey is so random that we will choose mostly D and E respondents. Maybe some is C. I think C would be about 9% of the population.
And that's to correspond with the voting population.
Yes.
What about OFWs? Do you seek them out because they also represent the voting population at a certain percentage?
They do represent the voting population. Of course, it's a face-to-face survey, so we don't necessarily include them. But usually we might be able to survey their family members who are here in the Philippines. And there's a high degree of correlation between family member voting. I mean, it's not all the time. I mean, sometimes we might vote differently from me and my mother, for example, might vote differently. But there's a high degree of correlation, so that more or less that's indirectly accounted for.
Lito, one thing that puzzles people is usually celebrities making it to the top 12. There are others that rate highly, like for example, Robin ranked number 1 in 2022. But then there are some people like Cesar Montano. His name comes up in the polls, but he never goes into the top 12. Or right now, Philip Salvador. He's also not making it to the top 12.
I think that would be a function of their relative appeal to the public, especially even in their campaign messaging. No? Not that the messages have been any profound, no? But you know, in the case of Robin, I think it was the song that made him win. And in 2019, I guess the reason why Bong Revilla made it, even if he was low, outside the winning circle in 2019 in the surveys, was because of his dancing on TV. You know, these are very shallow reasons, but unfortunately, as I said, no, that happens to be the political culture at the moment. No?
So in the case of President Duterte, you were also part of his campaign team, and he became president. But before that, years back, he was not even reaching double digits. I think when he started coming out in the presidential surveys, he only had 4% at some point.
Yeah.
Were there
It was a slow climb. It was a slow climb.
What did you do in terms of his campaign
Actually,
that you
I think
helped?
what tipped the scale for President Duterte was his performance during the 3 national debates. No? He performed very well. No? And I guess that's what made people take a second look at him, despite the profanity of his language and other things that normally would disturb guys like me, you know, who were working behind him. No? But that was it. He was very authentic, you know, and he connected to the masa, no? The DNE especially, no? Very well.
Some people would say that in 2016, that was a first election where social media played a huge part, and there are others who allege that trolls were used a lot in the 2016 elections. Is that true, and do you see this as becoming part of election strategy?
In 2016, I wouldn't say trolls were used very much. No? At least in the case of President Duterte, maybe some on their own. No? But basically, we had a very well-disciplined social media team based in Cebu, Cagayan de Oro, Davao, most of them, no? Anyway, and then later when the numbers were getting better, there was a lot of social media influencers who joined the bandwagon for President Duterte. But in 2022, the presence of trolls, no, was quite pronounced. No? And I guess that will happen again in this election, this forthcoming election, and more so in 2028 when we're talking about the presidency itself.
Dr. Guido, some people have also said, or those who seek to criticize surveys say that surveys are paid for, or yung iba sasabihin bayaran lang ang surveys. How would you refute that?
Well, I mean, of course, maybe they can look at my bank account or something. but as far as surveys, I mean, of course, surveys cost money, like I said. I mean, to run a national survey actually does cost a significant amount of money. And but like I said, at least in our case, it's non-commissioned. So that means that nobody has the control over it. We have the control over the survey, but the subscribers just pay for access to that. So, as far as, and people will criticize surveys, especially those, when it does not favor them. At least that's my experience, looking at surveys. But surveys have been traditionally used widely. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Lito has used surveys effectively. And for example, in the presidential elections in the U.S., I mean, they use surveys a lot. And there are several polling firms, and they even aggregate and average the results because there are several of them. That to get and some of them even have different results. Like right now, it's very close, and some have Trump leading by a small margin, some have Harris leading by a small margin. And it's the same thing in the Philippines. It's generally used as a guide. It's not meant to, say that this candidate is winning and that therefore we should vote for them. I always advise people to vote with their, with their minds, with their hearts, and make informed decisions on the people that they're voting for, do their own research, and not base it on survey results. We don't want something like a bandwagon effect now. Okay, this person's highest a survey, so therefore we will be voting for them. We want them to vote regardless of where they are in the survey. So, that's the advice I could give.
And Lito, in your experience, do you have any survey companies that are perceived as not as reliable or are not as objective compared to other firms?
Well, first of all, I believe in face-to-face surveys. No? I mean, I think in the present context, at least in the Philippines, yung mga online surveys, mga ganon, hindi pa tugma or hindi pa masyadong, the credibility of the results are not that good yet. No? Then again, there are survey companies or groups which sprout only during elections, no? Yung malapit na eleksyon. And normally, for guys like us, we know who they are, even if we will not mention them here in this program, no? So, kilala mo naman yung pwede mong pagkatiwalaan eh. And normally, also, to begin with, if I was handling a candidate, I would only suggest very credible companies. Because ayoko naman lokohin mo yung sarili mo, no? Some candidates, especially in the local scene, they discard surveys that are not favorable to them. And that's crazy, no? So, yun.
And Lito, in your opinion, what have been reliable survey companies?
Well, you have, of course, the pioneers in the industry. You know, you have SWS, Pulse Asia, PSRC, which is more on consumer survey, consumer research, but is also used. No? OCTA, for instance, which was very reliable, especially during the pandemic, no, in monitoring the conditions of the pandemic. No? More or less, ganon siguro.
So, in your opinion, are political surveys used as a mind conditioning tool? But before you answer that question, let's take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back.
The trailblazers, the disruptors, the titans of the industry.
We should safeguard our tradition.
We've got 53 sites in the Philippines, and each of those sites have been goaled to adopt a community.
Know what drives them as we dig deeper into their stories.
We're also bringing and helping medical tourism.
The government has to support these local farmers.
Industry Beacon on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Rise and shine, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Paolo Del Rosario. Get ready because we prepared a lot of great content for you to make the day even better.
And hello, I'm Monique Tuzon, bringing you a wave of positivity and a splash of happiness.
I'm Ann Asis Carrillo. Let's dive into some serious fun, and more fun.
Of course, we hope you found some inspiration.
And good vibes. Every day is
a beautiful day.
On BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
This is the scorecard where you score the latest news and in-depth views. I'm Anton Rojas, and this is tonight's roundup. On the scorecard tonight, feel like you're somebody who has that desire. Tell us about your experience. Get ready for a thrilling clash, thrilling hostilities, and keep your eyes on the prize. Sports is our business, and business is our sport. This has been the scorecard.
10 p.m. on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Welcome back at the forefront. Are survey polls being used as a mind conditioning tool for the elections?
Well, I mean, as far as our organization is concerned, at least from our, we don't feel that it's a mind conditioning tool. I mean, but surveys are just an instrument, and it's about gathering information and asking respondents what their preferences are. How surveys are used can sometimes, it can vary. In other words, there are influencers who use certain surveys to advance certain agendas or something. But all I can say is that as far as we're concerned, I mean, we definitely are politically agnostic, and we try to remain as such. And we don't try to influence one way or another. And I believe that as I mentioned earlier, many voters actually decide on the day itself who they would vote for.
It's really not meant to condition voters.
It's not meant to condition voters. I can't say how certain influencers will be using these surveys, and that's why I can only speak about how we conduct.
Come up with the survey. Lito, has this been used as a mind conditioning tool? For example, some of the candidates that you've handled or seen in the past, even if you didn't manage them, if it's favorable to you, then you probably will want to have that popularized or spread it for people to influence their voting.
Yeah, mind conditioning is not done by the credible survey or research firms, no? But it is used as a tool, no, to create a bandwagon effect, no, or to put somebody who's in the number 10 to 15 or 10 to 16 go higher, no, because in any case it's always a guide, no, on strategy, no. So that's how it is. For instance, if you look at the list of OCTA, which, as I said earlier, is basically similar to other earlier surveys, no? You will notice that most of them are supposed to be in the administration slate, no? The Bagong Pilipinas slate, which I understand is going to be announced either tomorrow or early next week. But the so-called the LP or the yellow-pink slate, which is right now only about 3 or 4 perhaps, no, di pa natin alam yon. And then also the Duterte, quote-unquote, the Duterte slate, no. I met with President Duterte. I mean, I happened to be in Davao when I called on him middle of August. And we discussed the Senate slate, his Senate slate, or those who he will endorse. And my advice, which I think he took, of course he can always change his mind, is for him to come up with only 6 names, no? rather than come up with so many names that will not, based on the surveys, have very little chances of winning anyway. And the sad part about it is he was telling me, kausapin mo na yung mga malabong manalo, no? Total maniniwala naman siguro sa iyo yun, na huwag nang tumakbo. Sabi ko, hindi ko trabaho yan, no? Napakahirap naman gawin ng gano'n, no? So, I think at the end of the day, he was saying mga 7 siguro para magnificent 7 in a joking mood, no? But I think he probably would only come up with a few names.
Do you already
not a complete slate.
Know who these 6 are, or the 7?
Well, of course, you have Bongo and Bato de la Rosa. They're already there, no? PDP also announced Philip Salvador, but I don't think, I think that's still up in the air, no? He might endorse also some names which are in the Bagong Pilipinas slate. That is a possibility, no? But that's up to him, no? Kasi ang problema, no? In his case, there are very few takers. The PDP laban has been decimated, so to speak, into a very small party from what it was. But that's always the case in this country because turncoatism has become part of the political culture, no? So, yun.
LP only has 3 candidates so far that we're aware of.
As far as I know, Bam Aquino, Chel Jokno, and Kiko Pangilinan, no? And the 2 are not even, Kiko is liberal. Bam has his own party. I don't know what name it is. And Chel joined Akbayan recently, no? So, that's how it is, no?
And in your opinion, this might be part of a mathematical question, but also more of a political strategy as well. Who do you think would be a dark horse for the midterm elections?
Dark horse?
Meaning they're not clearly in the top 12, but then you see them as still being a viable candidate, or their names might not be included yet there. Do you see Vice President Sara as potentially running?
No, I don't think she's
Senate?
running. She's already staying as Vice President. One is one of the Dutertes. I think Baste Duterte is likely to run. And then you have Doc Willie Ong or his wife, Dr. Alisa. Abby Binay is already announced, no? I think she will be part of the Bagong Pilipinas slate. Yun lang siguro ang unless a cabinet member, for instance, like Gilbert Teodoro, decides to join the fray. But right now, he's not also doing very well in the surveys. But that could change immediately if he runs, no? But that's up in the air. But otherwise, it's those names that was shown already earlier by Dr. Guido. Yun na yung mga kandidato.
Dr. Guido, when can we expect the next OCTA survey to come out?
Well, it will probably be before the end of the year, so sometime after the filing of the COC. So it takes a while to get these surveys. It's not just that they cost money, but they're resource intensive, so it takes about at least 1 month to complete this, the field work and then the tabulation of results and the statistical treatment. So, so maybe sometime in November and December. And to add to Sir Lito, some of the dark horses that, I sort of agree that one of the Dutertes, if one of them will be running, their numbers will probably consolidate towards that candidate. Because right now we have former President Rodrigo Duterte in the top 12, but if he backs out, as Sir Lito mentioned, then that may help one of his sons get a more solid position within the top 12. And also, I think what we're also seeing is Camille Villar, who's not as well known, of course, in the Villar family, but she's also rising in terms of the numbers. She's up to 17%. Outside the top 12, but we know what political machinery can do to help a candidate.
Very interesting conversations. Thank you so much, Dr. Guido David and Mr. Lito Banayo. The results of the latest OCTA Research senatorial survey is a product of a polling opinion, not a barometer of the outcome for the 2025 elections. The official filing of candidacies begins next week. By then, the public will know who they could vote for. Ultimately, the final decision rests on the Filipino voters. And if the election is called as the great equalizer, let our fate change for the better by making an intelligent vote. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for meaningful conversations that would help you form an objective personal opinion. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.
This is Pinky Webb, and it's a great opportunity.
Ang inyong lingkod si Corina Sanchez Rojas.
Corina Sanchez.
As they uphold their mission
is to be proud
Dalawang
of what we
mamamahayag
do with
na
our
subok
lives.
sa
Ito ako
tapang
ay
at
ating
talino.
chance to talk with all of you. Maraming salamat.
Pagsasamahin ng isa. Agenda. Mondays to Fridays, 6 p.m. Only on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The 14 Peaks first teenager, that is something that I'm soon gonna be, after my last mountain, and this is a very big kind of advantage for the Sherpa community and even for me and for everyone, because before this you cannot imagine a teenager doing the 14 Peaks. It was very much big learning in my life. These 2 years, I've learned so much things about nature, human body, human psychology, meeting new people, nature, and everything in the world. And I learned from the mountain.
At BNC, morning means business. The numbers and the stories that drive the economy and shape the world on Basis Points. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m. Cultivate a growth mindset and see where your finances is taking you on Follow the Money. Weekdays, 10:30 a.m. The stories behind successful micro, small, and medium enterprises on Pathways to Success. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Sit down with the trailblazers, the disruptors, and the titans of the industry on Industry Beacon. Weekdays, 11:30 a.m. Business as usual every morning. Only on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Let's take a look at today's headline.
Get to know the latest weather update and forecast with information to help us understand important aspects regarding our climate.
You're leading the charge of combating climate change, and you finally experienced it.
More weather updates and stories about the environment, climate change, and disaster preparedness, where we'll stay together whatever the weather.
Weather HQ with Paulo Del Rosario, 9 a.m. on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Filipino fashion and culture took center stage in Annex 417 along 5th Avenue in New York City, where Philippine Next hosted its second fashion event, founded by Bessie Bisana and Rob Malyari Diauria.